I'm told the Roman Baths is the only council-owned museum that's going to reopen this year. Is that to save money?
First of all, the Roman Baths will be reopening in early July. We've put a lot of effort into working out how we can safely reopen with less people in at any one time and a one-way route. So there's only going to be one entrance to the museum and a choice of two exits from the museum, one through the shop and then one out onto one of the other streets. So we have to be very careful. There's a lot we've got to learn, because it's not just that we want to ensure the safety of our visitors and people who come to our museums, but also we've got to look after our staff and make sure it all works. So that will be first, and that's opening up early July, and we will be evaluating how that works before we make firm and committed decisions on the other two. But we're losing 53 million in lost revenue in this coronavirus. And so we don't want to do anything that adds to that debt. So as we reopen bits, we'll be looking to make sure that they actually earn us some money.
Well, I don't want to push you. Well, I do want to push you on this one, because I've been told that the Victoria Art Gallery is not opening this year.
It's certainly not opening in July. We want to learn the lessons of how we reopen in the Roman Baths, which is our most popular one, and then Victoria Art Gallery and the Fashion Museum will open at a later date. At the moment, papers are being prepared with options, and when we've looked at all those options, we will announce an opening date.
I'm surprised you're not considering, bearing in mind the Fashion Museum has to move out of the assembly rooms in a year or so, not opening it at all.
Well, that is, of course, one of the options that we could do. The National Trust is also suffering in this COVID crisis. You know, they are losing a fortune in revenue, and I think you will find, if you do interview them, that they are actually also reviewing every single capital project they've got. So we've actually put in a request to say, could you consider allowing us to the end of our lease, which is, I think, in 2027. So we haven't had a response to that yet. So it might well be that the Fashion Museum has a little longer to go at the assembly rooms, and depending on the capital projects that the National Trust decides to carry on with, we might even have the option of staying there longer.
Well, I was going to say, you haven't got any spare cash to move the Fashion Museum elsewhere anyway.
We before the crisis, we had the ability to find locations, and we were looking for locations. I think we have to look at our current partners. So we have a very close partnership with Bath Spa University and their fashion course. So maybe there's a way we can work together with them to find innovative ways to display and make the contents of our museum accessible. The one thing that is absolutely for sure is that we're not getting rid of the museum, and whereas when you interviewed me a year ago, I said I was very hopeful that we would have a seamless transfer. I now, because of COVID, I simply can't make that assurance. But what I can assure you is that we're not getting rid of the museum, even if we have to look at innovative ways of making bits and pieces of it publicly available.
Someone suggested to me, and it's not a ridiculous idea, that because you've got such a huge cash deficit, this is maybe the time to consider selling the Roman Baths.
No. The Roman Baths, over the course of its life, has been integral to the council. It has been integral to the story of Bath, linking various parts of our history, as it does, pre-Roman, Roman, Georgian, Victorian. Every part of our history has a connection to the Roman Baths. It is the council that discovered it and brought it to life, and in most years it makes us a very good income. So the fact that we're having one bad year in a century of ownership, I think is not bad, and so I would certainly vote against any move to sell it, but who can tell what the government might force on local government.
Now, there are practicalities here in terms of staff. I don't know whether you are facing redundancies. And of course, tied in with that are the large number of volunteers who come in and give their time freely, people of a certain age. What's going to happen there?
So volunteers are absolutely vital, and that's and as you say, our volunteers are disproportionately in an elder age bracket, and so therefore it becomes even more important that all our opening is healthy and safe and secure, because the last thing we want is to open in a rush, miss something that's obvious, and having someone go ill as a result of this virus, which we still don't really understand how it moves around. And in this country, because of mistakes that were made at the start, I think we are suffering worse than most countries. You know, there's only really places like America, Brazil and Sweden that are on a comparator to us, and they all, I think what marks them out is they all didn't start with a really tough lockdown at the very earliest stage.
You're veering off into politics here, and I'm going to pull you back. You're not actually saying at this stage then that volunteers over the age of 50 are not going to be welcomed in this year?
No, we will welcome all our volunteers back as soon as we can absolutely ensure their health and safety. You know, and that's important to us as well as our staff and our visitors.
And what about members of staff? Are there people who will face redundancy?
Well, at the moment, we've put all our museums, we've used the furlough scheme, we're using the furlough scheme on that, so that has a bit of time to run. We are definitely reopening the Roman baths. As we reopen, I think we will have a much higher staff to visitor ratio, and that's not just because there'll be less visitors, but we will have to have far more staff in moving people around, making sure they don't take shortcuts and detours, and so that will, in the first instance, use some of our staff from the other two museums, which is why I was a bit reluctant to give you an opening date on those. So there's a lot of lessons that we have to learn in operating these big visitor attractions.
So it's going to cost you more in the short term, and without the income, without the revenue.
We're quite confident that we can make the Roman baths break even very quickly. Even without the coach tourists, which won't be coming back quickly, but we're very confident that we can make the Roman baths operate financially successfully in a short period of time.
Paul, can I ask you, if the Roman baths reopen, will the pump room reopen? I've been talking to a very concerned member of the pump room trio, a little concerned that maybe their contract won't be renewed.
The pump room trio are one of those treats that you only find in Bath, and there is no plans whatsoever at the moment that we are not going to. So that's a negative. Let me just phrase that again, because negatives are misinterpreted. The Pump Room Trio are one of Bath's special attractions. You know, they are unique. There's very few other places that have something like that. They're also very important to the operation of the facility there, and we have a large number of people that enjoy eating and drinking at that and listening to the Pump Room Trio. So there, we absolutely have a place for the Pump Room Trio in the opening and operation going forward.
And will the pump room open at the same time as the Roman baths?
Well, we're hoping to get that going as well at the same time, yes, because it makes sense, because people will be walking around. But again, that's a serving of food and drinks, so it's how we get staff moving around safely, how we get that food and drink coming in and out, so that's all being looked at.
I'm going to take you away from your heritage responsibilities now to talk about one of your leisure ones. It's no secret you're deciding the future of Entry Hill at your cabinet meeting on the 22nd of July. Now, other golf courses have already opened, but that hasn't included the Approach golf course. It's not reopened, and there is some concern that you are also going to dispense with that as well as Entry Hill when you meet on the 22nd?
I had one email yesterday asking me why we were going to be putting luxury housing on the approach golf course, and I had to reply back. I said the chances of that happening are zero. Our leisure facilities and our parks are very special to Bath, but we have to look at all our cost bases. So what we have got on the July 22nd cabinet will be a second paper which is looking at our total of our GLL provision, and you're quite right, the approach golf course is part of the GLL leisure provision. So we will be looking at our total leisure provision, and that is the sports centre, the Odd Down Sports Hub, Culver Hay Sports Hub, Keynsham Sports Hub, and Chew Valley Sports Hub.
Are you saying they're all under threat?
No, none of them are under threat. We're just reviewing what we've got and the services we provide and how we reopen and bring them back. So we want to bring back the leisure centre at Bath as our first, and again, as we learn how to operate on these reduced volumes of people. And we're still learning so much about the COVID. The thing that came up on the news today is that COVID can transmit more easily in water. So we have to find that out to see if that stops swimming completely until COVID's out of the way. There's a lot we don't know, and we have to go steadily. So in answer to your question, why have we not opened them? Because if we open them, we have to get them prepared and ready, and that will be in advance of what we're doing with GLL, working on a phased reintroduction of all our facilities. And I absolutely take your point that other golf courses are opened, but they are commercial operations where they've only got the one sport to consider. We are going to be looking at the whole of our leisure provision and bringing it back in phases. And so on that 22nd of July, there will be two very important papers.